Scott Browne today. Scott has recently started a group called In the Field, and they kind of gather their own data, if you will, their own video footage, analyze it, put it on the group, and kind of talk about it amongst themselves. And he's really been gaining some notoriety for this. This is kind of a unique way of doing it. The way he's chosen to do it, keeping it more of the analytical than the guessing, if you will. Like I said, it's gained him a lot of notoriety over the last few months. He's done a couple of interviews which have actually left some people in his group with more questions than answers. So we've decided to get together today and try to see if we could shed some light on Scott Browne. So Scott, thanks for joining us here.
Thanks a lot, Kev.
So, one of the questions that seems to be coming up a lot after your interviews was kind of what was the perpetrating factors that got you into this kind of field, and kind of any experiences that you've had that have led you to be so fascinated with this particular kind of phenomenon.
Yeah, I'm starting to get that question a lot. So, I can't really say that it's definitely connected to it, but I just have a gut feeling that something caused it to be this way. It was back in 1987, and I got married to my first wife, and we had our own apartment, and I fell asleep one night and woke up. I guess I was awake, and I had what some people call the sleep paralysis. I couldn't move, and I felt as if there was something in the room, and I was on a couch, and my back was to the room, and it just felt as if something was there. After a while, I snapped out of it, and it wasn't even maybe a week and a half, I think 2 weeks later, it happened again. And the second time, I proceeded to tell my ex-wife, I think this place is haunted. And, she kind of looked at me like, So we let it go. And it wasn't even a few months later, I had been reading a lot of biographies at the time. And I went into the bookstore and I went to the biography section and mistakenly put in there was this book called Out There by Howard Blum. He was a Washington Post reporter who uncovered a lot of FBI documents, a lot of stuff that was pertaining to the phenomena. I picked it up and I read it, and that was it for me. I began to rabidly consume anything I could find, any book, any document, the internet, just anything. And from that point, I began to remember incidents from my childhood that I'm not saying are connected. I'm just saying they're very strange. They were already strange, but I had no interest in the subject at that time. And the first incident was I was 3 years old. I disappeared from our house, out of a locked house, early in the morning, 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. My father was a police officer. Once they discovered me gone, they put out an APB, and the whole town was looking for me, neighbors, friends. It wasn't maybe an hour later, I wandered up out of a field, and my mother saw me, and I proceeded to claim that I was talking to cows. This was made such an impression on my mother that she wrote about it in her diary. Wow. And, that was the catalyst. I mean, I'll tell you right now that this incident in '87 was very frightening. It was something that it had a massive impact on me, and I didn't know why. And like I said, I'm not connecting it, but it's a very weird coincidence that from that point
Sure does sound like it. So, so during your research, I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier before we started this. It wasn't just that missing time, if you will, that time when you were missing, leaving from a locked home. You had started, as you researched more, you had started to remember more things from your youth.
Yes.
Right?
There was my younger brother, who was 2 years younger than me. I began to remember other incidents that involved him, and one of them was he would have this reoccurring dream.
How old was he at the time? Would you say?
I say I was probably, when the dream happened, I was maybe 6,
Okay.
and he was maybe 4.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so he kept having this reoccurring dream where he would come downstairs, he would see me on a table, and in his words, hooked up to machinery with men around me with big heads. And the running joke was that made him feel better was when he saw this in the dream, he grabbed one of their faces and pinched it as hard as he could, and they let him go. The person or whatever dropped him, and he ran back to his room and fell back to sleep. The second incident was he kept having a dream that he kept seeing a giant praying mantis looking in the window. And this happened, this same dream happened 3 or 4 different times. So that was kind of striking when I thought back to it.
So just to put that in kind of relation, when you were doing your research, did you stumble across anybody else who had maybe claimed to be abducted or had some kind of encounter with some kind of non-earthly beings?
Yeah, what happened was during the research, there were different things in the research that kept sparking my memory back to things in my life. And one of the very, very common themes is that abductees see these beings that look like giant praying mantises, and they've been described that way many, many times. The beings with the big heads, which is, we all know, very common.
Being hooked to machines on tables.
Right, on a table, hooked to machines. I mean, just very, very strange.
So when you first discovered these books, back in the 80s, and you were reading about these things, what kind of feeling did you have when these memories were triggered?
I was at the point where I was questioning everything. I couldn't, I kept trying to say, I was torn. I kept saying, did this happen? Did this not happen? Am I imagining things? Is this all a bunch of garbage? I mean, you just go through this whole range of emotions.
Sure.
I mean, I'm thinking, if it did happen, that's terrifying. And if it didn't happen, am I losing my mind? Am I going crazy? I mean, it runs you through a range of emotions.
So I guess what I would ask from that is, what made you so driven to pursue it, as opposed to most other of us would maybe run from that? But you took the opposite approach and seemed to really went right into it and really driven to find something on that.
I think part of it was fear. It's almost as if, when you're a child, it's very common to be afraid of the dark. I think as I got older, I began to have this massive drive to look into the dark, to face that, or to see if there's anything in there. And I think that's part of what drove me to do it.
Sure. So now, have you, since that time finding that book, has this been a linear, or have you, in other words, have you always done this, or have you found yourself falling off of that and coming back into it, or?
Good question. There were gaps. There were periods in my life where I kind of fell away from it. I didn't study for a while, and then things would trigger me to go back to it again. There were incidents in my home with my ex-wife where, there was one incident where I was standing with my best friend in the kitchen, and it was during the day, a day like today, and we were talking, and something pounded on the kitchen door 3 times, real hard rap. So I'm thinking, in that split second, some kid's fooling around.
Yeah, you didn't live out in the middle of anywhere. I mean, you were living
No,
in a neighborhood.
yeah, in a
right?
residential area, and I thought, some kid rapped the door and he ran. So I bolted across the kitchen, whipped the door open, nobody there. I ran out to the sidewalk, there's no place to hide, nobody there. My friend was so upset and freaked out by it, he got in his car and left. So, we really couldn't figure it out, and it made the hair stand up on my neck.
It kind of proves my case in point when I said most people would run when they started having these flashbacks, but you are driven to move forward to try to discover more.
Yeah, I mean,
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that, there's been times where I've been out there at night, my night vision cameras, by myself or with someone, and it's, I've seen things that have made the hair stand up on my neck. I mean, I've seen things that have just, it's made me rearrange my whole outlook on reality that, there's something else out there. And to come to me to ask me what it is, after all these years, I still don't have an answer.
So, just to go back, so you had gotten into reading a lot on the subject, doing a lot of those kinds of things. When did you actually start putting the books down and start picking up the cameras and filming this?
Another good question. It was approximately, I would say it was in the late 90s where I began to try to capture anomalies on film. A lot of it was with still cameras, and I was trying to capture the orbs and
Technology of the time.
right. And there was I knew there was people out there doing it with infrared, and I had seen a few clips online, and it kind of didn't really catch my fancy at first. And as I began to see these other people catching this stuff, I said, you know what? I've got to get myself an infrared camera, which came real late. I mean, I've only had my infrared camera for probably maybe a little over a year and a half. But I had caught other things regularly in regular video and in digital photos. I'd go sky fishing and shoot the sky. I'd shoot an average of, set up the tripod, shoot an average of, 30 to 60 photographs, and then go through those and examine them and just look for anomalies that were in the sky. And I began to pick up some weird stuff that I couldn't explain, and that just made me hunger for night vision and better equipment, and so.
And here you are.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. So I mean, we've all seen all this material on the internet for people who are doing this, and you see some things and you say, I don't think so. And then there's other things you say, I have no idea. So what I really like about your group that you've started is it kind of gets rid of those I don't think so's. And you seem to have gotten a lot of people who are really more interested, not so much hoaxing or getting famous or working on their craft, but you seem to have people who are legitimately fascinated by this subject. They're out there, daily, weekly, however often they can be with the equipment that they have, and they're actually capturing things that they cannot explain. How did you come across the idea to start gathering those people into one place as opposed to having them spread out amongst multiple groups?
I was actually had already been a member of some other groups associated with the phenomena on Facebook, and some of them were, and I don't want to put anybody down, but they were terrible. There was, people posting, the Galactic Federation and, just some of the most crazy stuff you've ever heard. Sounds like a science fiction movie. A lot of it wasn't based on research. They would choose things from these sites that are known for, falsified stories, falsified photographs, false video. And once I became aware of other people that were really out there, out there hunting, going out there on a weekly basis, setting up cameras, keeping their eyes on the sky all the time, keeping a camera ready, whether it's a phone, or a small mini cam or whatever they have. And so I said to myself, I really want to talk to these people. I wanna associate with these people, and I want to see what they think is going on, what they're using for equipment. I want to have a place where I can go, where I can pull it up on the web and say, hey, how's it going, Bob? What'd you catch last week? Something like that. I kept picturing this group in my mind, and then one day there was some, people who inspired me. Like Allison Cruz. A lot of people are familiar with her. She's shot some amazing stuff. Ken Hurt, he runs another group that I respect very much. Me and Ken are pretty good friends. There's another researcher from New Jersey, David Stinnett. There's a guy up from Canada, Charles Lamoureux. All of them inspired me to think to myself, I need to start this group. I need to get these people together and just, try to come up with some kind of, patterns. What are they around? Are they around power lines all the time? Are they around chemical plants? In Allison's case, there's a bunch of mines there.
Where's Allison from?
Allison's from Pennsylvania. She's been filming for many years out there and captured some incredible stuff. So, we're not sure, but we're trying to make connections.
It sounds to me like this is a lot more of a group of like-minded people who truly believe that there is something odd going on, for lack of a better term, and are getting together as a group and not so much discussing what they think it could be, but it's more of a scientific method you guys are using in observing behaviors, whether that be where they are, how they're acting, those kinds of things.
Well, we actually have this new woman in the group, and she actually sells this software. And what the software can be used for is you can modify it to, we want to set up a database. Now, there's already other groups that have that. There's interactive maps online. But what we want to do is we want to set up an interactive map that only maps what we're doing. So if we're, say Bob gets a sighting out in Missouri, catches it on film, it goes into the database and it tells, what time, what are the geographical features of where he is. Is there any power lines near him? Are there any nuclear plants? Are there any power plants? Just, we want it. So she's going to try to help us out and get that set up. She's new to the group, but, she's very, very sharp, and she's going to help us out and see what we can do with the software. So we'll see what happens.
Now, you had alluded to other groups doing that too, and I think it's important to say this. There's a lot of groups of scientists all throughout history that have worked on the same projects. And that's really where you can get good correlations, is if you have two different groups finding the same data. So I think that that's important. That you guys aren't doing anything necessarily unique, but you're doing it in a different way that has not been done before to gather data to compare. And that's what science is really all about. So it's refreshing that you're taking a scientific approach to this kind of phenomenon. It's, as we know, been stigmatized very much to be, as you alluded to earlier, science fiction, different beliefs. I've seen a lot of
Nut
different,
jobs.
well, a lot of different beliefs out there, and
Yeah.
there's a difference between fact and faith. And it sounds like you guys are more interested in the facts than any kind of beliefs associated with faith.
Yeah, it's something that I try to encourage in the group is myself. I'm very objective. I don't, you know, I've been studying it for over 25 years. If you ask me if it's, the ET hypothesis, I have no idea. I mean, if you ask me that it's some kind of living thing that's flying around giving off this glow, I have no idea. And so, until I have solid facts in front of me to let me figure out what this is, there is no answer.
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible, and I mean, it could be, robots in some other universe building probes to come here and look at us. Who knows? Nobody knows.
Fair to say.
So
just to talk a little bit more about the group. Now, you had talked about setting up this database. Are the members in this group only in the United States? Well, you had mentioned Canada, but is it just in North America, or is it?
it's globally. We have people in. We've probably got a half a dozen people in Australia. We've got a handful of people in Germany, Spain, Ireland, Turkey. Just all over. I don't want to leave anybody out, but so.
That's fair.
But there's the members are spread out all over the globe, which is kind of interesting when I have to use Google Translate to talk to them sometimes, so it's kind of tough, but it's fascinating.
Absolutely, and I tell you, technology is amazing that we're able to do that.
Yes.
Not only view each other's videos, but be able to speak with each other and not even speak the same language. That's technology is incredible.
It is.
And it makes you wonder, would this be possible without it? The technology, that is.
It would be virtually almost impossible, because you got to understand something. I mean, if you're thinking back to 20 years ago, I can have a guy in the group shoot a video last night, and when I get up in the morning, I'm already viewing this footage from 2 hours ago. Whereas years ago, people would shoot some stuff like a photograph or an 8mm film back in the old days, and it wouldn't come to light for months, sometimes years. People wouldn't see this stuff. Now we can actually see this stuff almost virtually moments after it's happening, and it's really fascinating.
Sounds exciting. So, just to go back to this technology piece, do you use any technology, or do you have any kind of method to determine, is this something that's explainable, or is this something that I cannot explain? In other words, is there a way to tell if it's a plane or a satellite or something along those lines?
Excellent question. A lot of us use different things. For instance, if I'm out here and I'm shooting and something goes over me, I'm always aware of, let's put it this way. There's a handful of websites that you can go to where you put in your zip code, you hit it, and it'll bring up every satellite that is going to go over your location for that night. It'll tell you the times when it's going to go over. That's one way. Another way is I have an app on my phone, and what I do is I hit the button, and if I see something, I hold up my phone, and it'll give me a crosshairs. When I hit it, it will tell me, and the thing about it is, it usually only works with commercial airlines. It'll tell me, this flight is going from New Jersey to Paris. It's a 747. It's flying at this elevation. There's other tools that we use too. A lot of it, I'll say that the tools that we use are important. A lot of it is experience. A lot of it is looking at the speed of a plane, the behavior of a plane, the behavior of a helicopter, a light configuration in the dark. Is it something that I've seen before? Is it a 747? Is it a helicopter? Or is it something weird? That doesn't really, I've never seen it before. And as time goes on and we look at more and more of this stuff, it becomes easier to ascertain what that is. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. Not so much what it is, but if it turns out that it's unknown, then obviously we don't know what it is.
Right.
More along the lines of, it gives us the power to identify it, so it becomes an IFO instead of a UFO.
I see. So it almost sounds like all these apps you use and different methods that you use are actually determining what it's not. It sounds like.
Right.
If you look on there and it doesn't come back as a plane, you know it's not a plane. If it's not coming back as a satellite in that region, it's not a satellite.
Right.
Do you use any of the similar methodology for animals, birds, things that fly, or is there a different method to determine, am I looking at a bug or am I looking at a faraway bird or something along
A
those
lot
lines?
of it has to do with, for example, if a bird flies in front of my camera and it's 50 feet away, it's going to go very fast because it's only 50 feet in front of me. If the bird is a speck in the sky, it's going to go very slowly. And of course, we take the video, we blow it up, we see if there's any evidence of wings flapping, any of that type of behavior. Does it fly not in a straight line, but it kind of meanders all over the place? Different factors that we look at to try to pick it out. And with the amount of footage that we have in the group, everybody has filmed these things, bugs, birds. Some people have caught the hexacopters, the remote-controlled devices. Those are fooling a lot of people right now. You can change the light configuration on them to make them look like a UFO. I mean, there's crazy stuff going on with those. There's all different kinds. And so we really have to be up on that stuff and be looking at those videos all the time so we know what that looks like. We know how it moves. We know the characteristics of it, so.
So it sounds like the double-edged sword of technology too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To conquer